I'm Jean Gray, founder and publisher of American Entrepreneurship Today, a website that brings news and valuable information to entrepreneurs, innovators, and investors all across America. Our podcast series, Experienced Voices, explores the journeys of very successful people in the entrepreneurial arena who are open to sharing the key elements that led to their great success. Our guest today on Experienced Voices is Tom Frazier, a serial entrepreneur and co-founder and CEO of Redivider, a startup that is building and deploying edge computing data centers throughout U.S. opportunity zones. Tom shares his entrepreneurial journey, leaving his position at the top of the corporate ladder for the challenge of creating disruptive technology that will directly impact people's lives. Tom also weighs in on AI, giving insight and advice to entrepreneurs on how to incorporate AI into their models to adapt to a rapidly changing landscape. Thanks for being a guest on Experienced Voices, Tom.
Yeah, sure.
Let's begin with your career at Verizon and what prompted you to become an entrepreneur.
So I was living in Australia at the time and was working for a company that was acquired by Verizon. And my role and responsibility was regional director around Asia Pac. So I was constantly talking cloud computing and security in many, many different countries all throughout Asia while I was based in Sydney. And, you know, it's such a large company that oftentimes major corporations are really risk averse. So they would rather protect losing 1% than growing by 10. And, you know, I kind of started to feel the frustration of that model, which makes sense when you're a company that size. But I started feeling the frustration of that model. And one day I woke up and I'll never forget, I had this feeling of, you know, I've been climbing this corporate ladder my whole career. And I feel like I got to the top rung or pretty close to the top rung. And I thought to myself, I've climbed the wrong ladder. And, you know, I just needed more creativity in my life. And, you know, that's when I left the company, started my own business with a partner of mine. We did pretty well. And at the time in Australia, the whole, quote, startup ecosystem just didn't really exist. You know, it was a very small group of people who were entrepreneurs. And so a few of us got together and we started a business incubator, and essentially trying to bring in a lot of experts, a lot of CEOs, CMOs, CTOs, lawyers, and really build this network of experts and put people through, entrepreneurs. We'd put them through like a boot camp style process of here's what it really takes to start your own company. You know, you've got to be a jack of all trades and a master of none in the beginning. And then eventually you become a master of being an entrepreneur. So that's kind of where I got my start in that, and haven't looked back since.
So you took that first step out the door. How did you think about risk in terms of where you were in your career, you know, as well as sort of in terms of income, family members? Did you have a fallback or exit strategy? Did you kind of assess the risks?
Well, yes and no. I figured it was a very calculated risk. In hindsight, knowing what I know now, I'd say the risks were a lot higher, but the benefits are also a lot higher too. So, you know, I wasn't married at the time. I didn't have kids at the time. So as a fallback plan, you know, the kind of things that I'm a quote expert in around computing or information security or marketing, you know, these are skills that could be, you know, I could go get a regular job again if I needed to. But, you know, the very beginning was quite hard. It was very humbling. I didn't pay myself for just over 2 years. And, you know, because I knew every dollar that I was putting into the business, completely bootstrapped, was either mine or my partner's. And so we were very conservative. And just by way of example, you know, our desk for the first year, 2 years was a literal door we took off the hinges and you know, laid it flat because that was the cheapest solution. So yeah, I mean, there definitely are risks associated with it. I felt those risks every day. I do look at it a little bit differently today than I did when I started as a first-time entrepreneur.
Well, when you say you look at it differently today, what's the difference?
I mean, a multitude. So again, this think of this arc over the past maybe 15, 20 years of what it means to have a startup. It used to require huge amounts of capital to go and buy servers and hire lots of people to do lots of different things. And if you look at it today, the barrier to entry is effectively zero. There are so many resources available today in terms of how the process of being an entrepreneur. The resources to launch a business are also plentiful and cheap. The cost of computing is it's not zero, but it's approaching zero compared to where it was 10 or 15 years ago. With the advent of AI, there's a lot of mundane tasks that can be done in a more technological or automated way. And so the risk to starting something in a bootstrap mode today is in a lot of ways a lot lower, in the sense that you don't have to, my advice to someone today who has a job and they're passionate about a problem, my advice is don't quit your job. Why would you do that? There's so many things that you could do now on the side to determine your minimum viability as a business, your minimum viability as a product, that those things are a lot easier and a lot better. Now, the more difficult things today than there were back then is, funding is a lot more competitive than it used to be. Everybody has an idea. Everybody can launch a company when the barriers to entry are almost zero. And so you have to show real traction in what you're doing. You have to show the market has a real need. There's this old saying, I'll never forget this, really stuck with me, was you want to be a painkiller, not a vitamin, right? People forget to take vitamins, but they never forget to take, painkillers like Tylenol or Advil when they're hurting. So, those types of things, in order to raise money to grow your startup today, you really have to focus on that painkiller mentality.
You started with partners and in a business incubator environment that you were creating. Many entrepreneurs, first-time entrepreneurs, in the first year or two have to dig down really deep. So what did you, in hindsight, look back and some of the challenges you had, and I'm hoping your partners were very cross-supportive of you, is where did you have to dig down deep in the first couple of years? And were any of the skills from your corporate experience able to help you through those tough times?
Ooh, lots to unpack there. Yes, I learned a lot working for, large government agencies and, big Fortune 10 companies. And, the practice of execution of business, when you learn it in a very prescriptive way, you tend to have a high baseline when you start. So, for example, if someone did not have expertise in the domain that they're trying to be an entrepreneur in, right? You're a farmer and you want to build a tech startup. There might be some complications there around where you have to dig deep that I didn't, because I've generally stayed in the domains that I'm comfortable in. And so the areas that I need to flex are what I call type 2 problems. So type 1 problems are, it's a problem that's existed, and by the way, someone's already solved it. Whereas a type 2 problem is, hey, I'm doing something that's kind of never been done this way before. And so the areas that I've had to dig deep in my career, I try to keep them in that second bucket of there is no answer, there is no reasonable answer or repeatable answer. And so I need to create that myself. And all the type 1 problems of, how do you do accounting? Well, people have solved that and there's technology to solve that. So the areas I tend to dig deeper are in that second camp. And in regards to my partners, it's the same thing. You'll get so many opinions about how you should start a business. You should do it by yourself because you have the most money, or you should do it with people who complement you, skill set wise, all those things. My belief is different. If you close your eyes and you imagine every exciting, happy moment that you've ever had, I'm pretty sure it's been with somebody that you've cared about standing right next to you. And I really have the philosophy of you should do business with your friends, because when the going gets tough, it's about being there for your partner or partners. And I feel that is a far more important thing in a partnership than a skill set. Skills you can acquire by hiring somebody, you can acquire by buying some software or implementing a process or procedure. But the idea that when the times are tough, and they will be tough, they're always tough, having somebody there with you definitely makes a difference when they're bad, and definitely makes a difference when they're good.
Does that work better for a person who is people savvy? And since many entrepreneurs are starting in college, do they have the savviness that maybe someone 15 or 20 years into the working world has already gained?
Yeah. I think it's a spectrum of value, in the sense of a younger person in college is not going to have the life experience that would be comparable to someone who's been working before they've done a startup, right? The average age of startup founders is like, you can look it up, but I think it's like 40 plus. And that number is getting younger. So as a young person, if you're people savvy, I think you're going to have an easier time than if you're someone who's more middle-aged, like out of college or in their 40s, like me. It's going to be easier on the people side because you're less set in your ways. You're more open. And, I would actually kind of frame this a little bit different than your question, in that, you have to be married to the problem instead of your solution. And I have heard pitches from in the multiple thousands from startups over the years. And I would say the people that focus on their solution, whether they're technical people or they're people, they tend to fail. The ones that stay focused on the problem, they will iterate through one solution, 10 solutions, 100 solutions until they solve that problem. So I tend to think, someone who's in college might be more open to that because they're in the frame of exploring what they want for their future. And therefore, they might be more attached to a problem. And I do think that's a little bit disadvantaged for more seasoned entrepreneurs who tend to go, I've already created the best way. I know this is how it should be. And they're a little less flexible. And that's a recipe for disaster.
So share a little bit about how you've gone about setting up Redivider. When did you start it? Is it actually are you the sole owner? Are there partners? Did you go out and find future investors and just bring them along for the early stage development?
Sure. So Redivider was started legally incorporated in 2021. The ideation of it was probably in 2020. And the basic premise is landscape is changing dramatically right before our eyes. Human beings, the thing we consume the most is water. The second most thing we consume is data. And traditionally for data centers, that has meant building really large football field size, buildings that house all kinds of computers and stuff. Where we're going, where the future is headed, is this idea that computing can move closer to where the data is generated. So think of a factory with a bunch of IoT connected machinery, or think of cars moving around and all the data that's happening. So we believed at the time, and still do, that edge computing is the future. The idea of a prefabricated small facility that you can deploy thousands is going to be the next layer of the fabric of the internet across the globe. And in my career, what I've noticed is, along the way, as computing has evolved, we've largely not brought humanity along with it. So the chain GDP, which just means the dollars created locally and how they're spent locally, that chain GDP number for communities across the globe is actually quite low when you consider computing facilities, right? You do a traditional facility, you bring in national contractors who don't spend locally. You then have a largely lights out facility, and all the intellectual capital and salaries go to centralized places like Silicon Valley. And what that's done is over time is just created a larger wedge between our ability to do computing, our capacity for data, but that's created a divide against humanity itself. And so the concept of Redivider, in a long-winded way of saying, is We're focusing on edge computing with the idea that environmental sustainability and social impact are two key pillars that are going to make a meaningful difference for my life and the life of my children. And, when you think a certain way like that, I mean, these are your kind of profound ideas. When you think of a certain way, you tend to attract people who think like you, and you tend to repel people who are opposed to that. And so with Redivider, we were a founding team of 4 people that all had the same kind of feeling about how we wanted to go about this. So we initially stood up our own private equity fund called a Qualified Opportunity Zone Fund to deploy our facilities in opportunity zones around the United States. That's what fueled the initial development of the business and all of our prototypes and our design libraries and our whole methodology about doing this. And then from that, we were able to bring on other experts to the team who complement kind of what we're doing. So someone who's a specialist in social impact, a partnership with a company who specializes in carbon accounting are just 2 examples. But it really started with 4 like-minded people with a high level of trust and this shared mission about redefining computing.
Can you share a little bit more about opportunity zones?
Sure. Opportunity zones are physical tracts of land throughout the United States that are somewhat disadvantaged. So it started under Obama. It was signed into law under Trump and still exists today. So it's a federal program run by the Housing and Urban Development, and you can just look up opportunity zone map, and basically every state in America has opportunity zones. And what an opportunity zone fund and a business is intended to do is bring investment into local communities. Think of communities that have been left behind, like a steel mill town where the mill got shut down 20 years ago, or a sawmill, or, a newspaper factory, all those kinds of little towns that are all throughout America. The idea is by investing dollars into these small towns throughout the United States, you can spur economic development. And we've taken that a step further by being an opportunity zone business, saying, yes, we will do that economic development. We will invest millions of dollars in data centers in many of these locations throughout the United States. But we want to do so in the spirit of helping these communities beyond just, hey, we're putting a couple $1 million in here or $10 million. So we have an entire social impact agenda of helping create jobs that are aligned with the future for some of these towns. So, for example, if we're doing a facility around mining Bitcoin, we can help teach people about blockchain. Or if we're doing it around clean energy, how does clean energy work? What is a microgrid island? All these sort of concepts that we can offer training for free to these local communities to give them skills that will help get them jobs that are not necessarily tied to the available work that they've had in their past.
Is what you're doing something that other entrepreneurs should be looking at as an avenue for getting their businesses started?
I think it depends on the confidence of the entrepreneur. Like I said, those type 1 and type 2 problems of things that have been solved before and the unknown. For Redivider, the problems we have are all these type 2 problems. There's a lot of nuance to, one, being a startup in the data center space, given that the capital required to build this out is enormous. Doing so with sustainability and social impact. There's just all these major initiatives. So obviously seasoned entrepreneurs can start creating these visions and execution bubbles that are larger. First-time entrepreneurs, I would say start with something clearly aligned with what you're comfortable in already. And it doesn't have to be something that is huge and profound, because as much as you're trying to build a business, you're also trying to build your skills in being an entrepreneur. And if you look at the numbers, and there's a lot of different data points, first-time entrepreneurs that have a successful exit of their first company is extremely low. so you have to think of it as an education as well. And so I think I would say start with something that is reasonable in size, stay focused on the problem, but importantly, stick to the domain that you have an understanding of. And for me, that's data, technology, computing, security, that sort of field.
Does the Opportunity Zone help with your initial funding? Can you explain a little bit about your private investment, and does it marry into Opportunity funding, Opportunity Zone funding, or is your approach in getting your prototype made totally different?
That was our thinking. When we set out to do this, the federal government gives incredible tax advantages to investors that invest into an Opportunity Zone fund. And we thought, man, this is just great. We can really do a lot of good here and have this fund. What we learned along the way is, fundraising itself is hard. It's like super hard. It's a full-time job. You can't just kind of do it. You have to really, really focus on it and have the right systems in place and your messaging and, all the legal implications of it. What we found with the Opportunity Zone is it's actually more difficult for our particular domain. And the reason for that is, again, to do data centers is extremely expensive. We're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars here. It's hundreds of millions of dollars. And the type of investors that have that sort of capital to invest in don't necessarily gain the same benefit of an Opportunity Zone fund that high net worth individuals might. So it was useful for us in the sense that it allowed having our own fund that we didn't, to back up, we didn't want to create our own fund. That wasn't the goal. The goal was we wanted to be an Opportunity Zone business. And to do so, you have to be invested from an Opportunity Zone fund. So we did our own fund to ensure our success and to de-risk our Opportunity Zone business. Is it the right thing for every entrepreneur? Definitely some people. 100% it would be viable for certain people in certain types of businesses to start their entrepreneurial journey. But I would say it'd be better to find an existing Opportunity Zone fund that might fit your physical location or the type of work that you're going to be doing. Because, building an Opportunity Zone fund from scratch is exactly what you think it is. It's building a private equity fund. And then on top of that, being an entrepreneur for your own business. So it's been double or triple duty for the past 3 years to make that come true. So again, for early entrepreneurs, reduce the variables. Maybe that's not a good focus for you, and stick to your knitting on the problem you're trying to solve.
And a bit easier for you having partners to really put the whole plan together and to execute. That was probably an important ingredient? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not a solo founder kind of guy. Like, the world is love and joy and needs to be done together.
Let's talk a little bit about people, planet, and profit that I found on your website and seems to be a big part of your thinking in being forward-looking and taking some of the opportunities that you have surveyed to take on these data centers and have a significant impact. That's very visionary. How do you see yourself in what you're evangelizing?
Yeah, people, planet, profit. Essentially, we came up with what we believe are our core values, right? So the standard process here is, what's your mission? What are your core values? What are these different parts of what you stand for? And, our Redivider's mission is to uplift humanity through new types of computing. And the way we do that is by our set of values, one of which is, people, planet, and then profit, profit being the last, because what the studies have shown over and over and over again is businesses that are high quality businesses that focus on things beyond the product i.e. they invest in impact programs, they invest in sustainability, they can create sustainable advantage, competitive advantage, or a moat, however you want to describe it, that will then yield higher profits. And that's exactly what we're going to do, in the sense that by focusing on these communities in opportunity zones and these people and how we can create a better America is core to what we're doing. And the planet part, obviously, data centers are a baseload customer of power. And by that, I mean, they're generally always on. You know, if you think of someone's house, there's this thing in the energy market called the duck curve. You can explore that on Google or anywhere. It's basically saying in the morning in your house, you have high energy usage. It's kind of low during the day, and then it's high again when everyone comes home from work. Unlike the duck curve for residential or even commercial, baseload customers like data centers is just always on. And so the idea of finding sustainable energy solutions, sustainable solutions around carbon accounting to measure what goes into our facilities, the operation of our facilities, the decommissioning of our facilities, understanding all of those pieces under the context of, are we sure that we're doing this in a way that's aligned with making the planet better than when we started, were very important. And we think, based on those things of aligning people and the planet, that the long-term profit and value of Redivider increases.
How did you go about quantifying your vision, and particularly when you're talking to potential investors, that in the long term, if you're successful, where you can measure or give an observable measure of improvement or contribution?
That is the hard part. That's a lot of work by a lot of smart people. And, you know, essentially we've gotten experts in a lot of different domains to help us understand the market of doing this on its own to start with. You know, for example, the idea that businesses have a baseline measurement of just their carbon emission is still in its very early days. And we're not talking about just establishing a baseline. We're talking about establishing a low baseline and then having, you know, efficiency improvement programs to even reduce that further. So it really took a lot of experts in a lot of different domains to help us put this together from a sustainability perspective, and again, for the social impact. And the social impact one in our case was actually more difficult, because typically social impact programs are done in retrospect. Hey, we've been operating X things for Y period of time. Let's measure what that is now and do some social impact programs. And then 3 to 6 months or a year later, we'll measure the difference. Well, we still have that objective, but we're starting from scratch. So we also had to build our social impact development program of saying, if we were to do this from nothing, what does that look like? And that's one of those type 2 problems of, you know, despite how many experts we talk to about it, it is extremely rare for a company to put together a social impact development program prior to having a footprint. And, you know, it's not been an easy road, but it's one that definitely bears fruit.
Now, your launch is coming up. When will that happen? And what are the expectations of all the parties surrounding that big step?
Yeah, so we've been working, again, the idea was probably 2020. It's now middle of 2023. Our very first facility is coming online, you know, this summer. And the expectations of that are, you know, for me, quite rewarding, in the sense of we're developing something that is new to market. We're doing it in a way that is genuinely unique, and we're doing it in a way that is benefiting Americans in new ways from, you know, again, social impact, sustainability. And ultimately, we look at it as the expectation that we have is this pilot site that we're doing, we're going to be able to expand upon what we already have built, prefabricated modular facilities, noise pollution reduction, this thing, that thing, all the little benefits that we've devised. But we can expand upon that both in that site, as well as take the learnings that we get from that and use that for all of our other hundreds of locations.
So how quickly would you be able to go from 1 to 10, 50, 100 within the first year or two after that pilot? Is that something you've already built into the equation?
It is. So we've definitely figured out the nuts and bolts of how that works. And just to get a little bit technical, our approach to doing data centers is prefabricated. And what that means is instead of having construction workers show up on a job site and they build a building for 2 years and then they turn it on after 2 years, our model is let's prefabricate a data center in a factory. And we make it about the maximum size that'll fit on a truck or a train or a boat. And if it needs to be bigger, they're modules. So we can have, a small one is 1 module, a big one could be 100 modules, whatever. But in doing that, that allows us to do a bunch of different things. One, consistent quality. We have it really aligned to costs, all these benefits. But we also get to create jobs where America needs them. We get to create these factory jobs in opportunity zone locations. But in terms of how fast we can deploy after the pilot, it's a little bit of a supply chain issue in that when you talk data centers, again, the typical math is about 2 years of time. What we're going to do is say, hey, we're driving all the components through our supply chain to put them into the factory process. And in the first 12 months, we will just be back in build mode at a higher scale after the pilot. But our plan, once those first units start coming out of the factory floor, is that we're deploying multiple of these data center facilities every single month, with ultimately, once we've completely seeded the supply chain all the way through and we're at full capacity operation, our goal is to go from dirt to live computing within 30 days, which is an absolute unheard of number when the average time is 2 years.
Now, that is a lot to accomplish. And if I have a tech entrepreneur listening to our discussion, would you say it's fair or general advice that you're accomplishing this because of the network that you created? Maybe it began at Verizon or crystallized in your business incubator, but you have pulled together a phenomenal amount of resources to make this happen. So what's the words of advice for a tech entrepreneur who has a grand idea, but it needs to rely upon so many different things to make it happen?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Like, again, I've been in this space for more than 25 years. So the idea of this grand vision that we have to uplift humanity through edge computing is a very big vision. And it's obviously not just me. I mean, we have some of the smartest minds on the planet helping on different aspects of what we're doing. And so I think a first-time entrepreneur probably wouldn't have access to the team and kind of approach that we have. And so it may not be a good fit for them. But, my advice to first-time entrepreneurs is you're probably, there's probably 2 things. And again, this is not judging anybody, but just self-reflection out of the thousands I've talked to. One, you're probably focused on your solution instead of the problem. And there's a mindset shift there. If you have a whiteboard in your office, right, focus on the problem in really big letters, because it will change how you make decisions. The second is not thinking big enough about the problem you're solving. And I'll just give you an example that I use all the time. And I don't know why this is my example, but it is. If you invent a mosquito spray that lasts 2 hours longer, great. Well, that's a feature. And a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, that's what they talk about. Oh yeah, this thing lasts 2 hours longer. But the benefit of that is you can spend 2 hours outside, 2 more hours outside. And that's a much better message of, hey, why don't you spend more time outside? Because my feature is that our bug spray lasts 2 hours longer. But the real unlock for early entrepreneurs is to focus on what I call the benefit of the benefit. So what's the benefit of being outside for 2 more hours? You get to enjoy the summer with your family because you can stay outside longer, because my product lasts 2 hours longer. And that benefit of the benefit, if you start solving the problem of helping families stay outside longer, instead of, making it 2.1 hours on the bug spray, what you might find is you might have a whole unlock of different ideas that fit underneath that problem that you then can go tell a story that's much broader, much richer, and, solves more problems. And in the case of Redivider, that's the same sort of thing. Having a smaller data center is great, but the benefit of that is there's much more flexibility around the computing and what we can do with it. And the benefit of that benefit, we can uplift humanity by a change in computing.
I once heard someone on a venture capital panel say, and I don't know if this is true, I'll run it by you, is that 85% of the entrepreneurs that we fund 1 year down the road, their business model has substantially changed. What do you think of that thinking?
I don't know if 85% is right or not, but, I think the idea of an inevitable pivot is absolutely true. And again, just focus on the problem in your whiteboard. And what you'll find is you may think your solution is amazing, and then you actually go do product market fit, or you do some testing, or, whatever. You may find that your solution is garbage, like literal garbage. You may have thought for 2 years that this is the best thing. And then actually no one really cares about that. But in the process, there is something that's better. And so you do pivot and make a change. And ultimately you can create the success that you had intentioned for. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. And, I think the missing kind of fact and figure around that concept is how many startups fail? Well, it's the majority. The absolute majority of startups fail. So, and the reason is they're focused on the solution, or, they're unwilling to make changes, to make decisions based on data. So yeah, it is a real thing, and startup founders should be prepared for that.
I like your approach of focusing on the problem, and the way it's resonating with me is that if you're focusing on the solution, you can get drawn into so many other things that take your focus away from where you initially started, and you can buy into things that keep you trapped. Is that a fair way of looking at
Yep.
why a problem, solving the problem and staying dedicated to the problem keeps you out, in some ways, out of trouble in a better way?
Yeah, because you reduce your confirmation bias, right? If you think what you have is great, like if any parent, their kid is the best kid, the best looking kid, the happiest kid, everyone has bias to their children, me included. And a lot of times startup founders need to feel like their startup is their child. And so, but at the same time, it's not. It's a business, and focusing on the problem reduces that confirmation bias. You're more willing to receive information about the market that you're selling into and it's your product's resonance, or maybe the cost to acquire a customer is just unsustainable for how you need to grow. So there are a lot of benefits to that mentality for sure.
Well, as we wrap up, what should we be looking for in the near term, say over the next 6 months, in your area of technology, in data centers? Are you the only one coming up with such disruptive and innovative approaches, or are there a lot of other companies approaching data centers, and what are they seeing as the problems?
So first and foremost, there are a handful of people like us that really feel there's an opportunity to do things in a much better way for people, planet, and then profit. We're not alone in that. we are one of the pioneers of that. And there's plenty of blue ocean over here for others to come join us, for sure. But in terms of the next 6 months, in terms of technology that's applicable to us and others, I mean, AI is just at a level that is unbelievable. So as it relates to data centers, there's going to be a significant workload requirement for training AI models or computer vision models or any sort of machine learning and all these kind of facets. But for a regular startup founder, the inclusion of AI into your business is critical. If you don't do it, you're dead. I mean, it's I'm pretty hardline that's the case, and it's because various AI systems can do things so much cheaper, so much faster than you can do. It could help you write your sales copy, or it can help you solve really complicated problems if you needed to. So that's number one, I would say, is AI, ensuring you're across it, how to leverage it for its benefits.
Actually, you've hit upon, I know it was supposed to be my last question, but now you hit on something that I have been really thinking about with regard to AI, is how is, let's just say, I'll give you an example that someone comes out and has a new, a startup 2 or 3 years ago, and they're selling better business lead development, and they're getting data in a more efficient way. Why is that entrepreneur in that particular industry, or maybe it's how is that particular entrepreneur able to access AI to fill in their business model if they do not have high-tech skills to understand it? Because it almost sounds like people, just like you said, is AI is just a plug-in. Everyone be aware, AI is changing, seismic changing the landscape, but people don't know what AI is relative to their business model.
Yeah, it's tricky. And to a lot of I'll give a 2-part answer, but to the first part is a lot of entrepreneurs who are trying to start an AI company, just be very mindful that you are not a feature. You have to be a product. So if you are a feature that can instantly get wiped out by OpenAI or Google or Microsoft or Amazon, if they can just go, oh, that's a good idea, click, clack, and now they have that feature in their system, your entire process is dead. So really focus on making sure your product solves problems that you're doing in a unique way. You have a unique data set for, or there's some component to it that can't just be replicated as a feature for somebody else. So that's the first part. The second part, you don't need to be technical now. Just going back to the people person versus technical person, the historic problem with startups has been you're a air quote business person, and now you just need that tech founder to join you to take over the world. And then every tech person rolls their eyes and go, okay, so you want me to do all this work for free to build a product when we don't even know if it's going to work in the market yet, because that's just how this goes. That dynamic is over. You can be a non-technical person and start a very technical business, and AI will help you do it. AI can help write Python programs for you, or help describe how to create an Amazon Web Services infrastructure for you, or just any number of technical things can be now done with the help of AI. And the same is true of any other domain. If you are not good at marketing, there are AI tools that can help you with marketing. If you're not good at sales, there's AI tools that can help you with sales. So it's about harnessing these technologies to your advantage to make sure that you outperform your peer group, to make sure you offer value that's never been in the market before.
And I'm going to ask, just like, I hate to use this phrase, a really dumb question, but someone's listening to this and says, okay, well, where do I go? Okay, I have a business model. I'm going into I'm in this particular industry, and I'm hearing AI is changing everything. Well, whose door do I knock on, or what website do I Google? Where do I begin the process of appreciating AI in my startup that I'm planning right now?
What is overwhelming is that question. If you look at the AI headlines in the news today, there's a new AI tool 5 times a day. I mean, it's insane how rapid this is growing. So I think the best place to start is actually GitHub. GitHub is it's like social networking for developers. It's where there's a lot of content of open source, which is another one of our key values. There's a lot of open source stuff there for you to look at. There are other businesses like Hugging Face, which is kind of a marketplace for AI models you can go and explore and play with. There's vendors of AI that you can look at. The one that's in the headlines every day is ChatGPT. It's free or nearly free to get started with and play around. And you know what? Ask it about your business. Give it the name, give it all this stuff. You don't need to be secretive. No one's going to steal your idea, despite the fact that everyone thinks that's true. No one cares. Give it all the information and ask it to help you. Say, please help me create a business. I want it to be about this. And here's what I think I want to do. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? Who are some experts that I can talk to? What are some good resources? Use AI as a research tool to help you be successful to start with. And then you can operationalize AI in your business to deliver unique insights and unique value.
Are incubators making a shift in how they're evaluating business plans that are being sent to them as to who to accept into the incubator? Are they wanting business plans in which the AI has already been figured out, or are they accepting business plans in which they will help the entrepreneur learn AI?
I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that question, but I will give the context around the question that I think is applicable. There has never, ever, ever been a better time to be an entrepreneur than right now today. Literally today. Because if you think of how startups have been created in the past, it's been through business accelerators, incubators, venture capital. You go bigger and bigger money, right? And there was this whole institutional environment around making sure that these companies with great ideas had enough capital to grow. And a huge portion of that money was used to hire teams of people to do specialized jobs. As AI helps take over marketing copy and creating websites and doing sales and email and your product itself with the technology and what my thinking is on a macro basis, the number of bootstrap founders who say, I'm going to opt out of that whole system. I don't need $1 million check because now I can do that same thing where instead of using a lot of people, I can lean heavier on the technology and the process. So my basic idea is people, process, technology are the 3 ways you need to build a startup. And if you don't need the money to spend on people and you can operationalize heavy with process and technology, and AI is one of the levers you have to do that, you can bootstrap it yourself. You don't need millions of dollars. You need thousands of dollars. And if someone keeps their job full time, builds something out, verifies there's product market fit, really starts going down the path, they can, I think you're going to see tens or hundreds of thousands of companies now that opt out of the traditional startup route of needing venture capital.
Well, that's very optimistic view as we end our conversation. And I really want to thank you for being on Experience Voices. And I'm hoping those who are listening are going to take some of the things that you've offered and embed it into what their plans are for their startup. So again, Tom, thanks again for joining me in this discussion.
Oh, thank you very much.
You've been listening to the podcast series Experience Voices, hosted by Jean Gray, publisher of American Entrepreneurship Today. Sign up for the series at americanentrepreneurship.com/podcasts.